Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the Business Revolution week so far. We're very excited to be bringing this special event to you, and we thank you for your attendance. My name is John Hannon, and I'm an analyst with Culkin Ginsburg. I wanted to run through a few housekeeping items before we jump into the informative roundtable that we've got for you. First, I want to thank our wonderful sponsors and subject matter experts for their continued support. Without them, none of this would be possible, so we're very thankful to them. Second, I'd like to give a disclaimer. The information that you're about to hear in this roundtable discussion is not intended as legal, financial, or advice of any kind, and it may not be used as such. Advice must be tailored to the specific circumstances of each case. Every effort has been made to ensure that this information is up to date as of the date of this roundtable. It is not intended to be a full and exhaustive explanation, nor may you use this information to replace the advice of your own legal counsel. The speakers assume no liability for any verbal mistakes or other errors contained in this roundtable, or for changes that occur in the future that affect anything that's discussed therein. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mike, and we'll jump right into this informative roundtable. Thank you.
Good day, everybody. This is Mike Ginsburg, President and CEO of Culkin Ginsburg Company. We're excited that you're taking a part in our revolution. It has been quite a year. We've assembled some of the top executives in the arm industry to discuss developing trends and challenges, specifically as it relates to first-party collections. First, let me take a moment and introduce our subject matter experts. Tim Casey joins us from Chicago, Illinois, CEO of Alliance One, the accounts receivable division of Teleperformance. Tim has over 30 years experience in the call center industry. He has an extensive background in both delivery of quality contact through multiple lines of business, including customer care, technical support, telesales, and collections. He also has responsibilities supporting the US and Canadian markets, including domestic, nearshore, and offshore delivery capabilities. As CEO of this operating unit within Teleperformance, his responsibilities include leading operations, business development, finance, legal, compliance, you name it, as it relates to the P&L. Next on our hit list, Phil Neufeld. He's a Senior Vice President, Strategic Operations for Bill Gosling, based in Canada. Phil has 25 plus years in the contact center and collections industry across a diverse mix of verticals. He lends his experience and expertise in driving business growth through the execution of agile solutions and driven by data insights and performance. Today, he leads the teams, the collection, dialer, trace, strategic teams to build effective pricing models, as well as WFM, and builds forecast execution of the omni-channel customer experience. I can tell you that this company, Bill Gosling, while it's based in Canada, I would call that headquarters. They have substantial operating centers both in the United States as well as in the UK. Third, last but not least, Nathan Jones, Vice President of First Party Operations within his business at CBE Companies. 15 years experience in the BPO space. He's held positions including Director of Fraud Operations, Director of Training, Director of Program Management, and Vice President of International First Party Operations. As you can see, everybody is really geared into the ARM industry, accounts receivable management industry. But also, as you can see, they have extensive experience in this particular subject matter, first-party collections. Let's get started. Gentlemen, thank you all. We appreciate your time today. We're excited to have you. Really broke this down as we looked at the topics that we all submitted and the areas that we wanted to discuss. We broke this down kind of into two areas. One is, of course, COVID-related topics. We've all been dealing with the pandemic now for over 6 months. And we're going to get into various aspects of how that affects and also initiate some changes within the business. Secondarily is this work from home capability, also related to coronavirus. So Tim, why don't we get started here? And why don't you talk about, after the initial onset of the pandemic, forecasting and how forecasts were off and what you're kind of seeing today, specifically as it relates to reforecasting, trying to get our numbers right.
Thanks, Mike. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here and representing the first party collection business. I think it'll be a good discussion we're having with Phil and Nathan and yourself. As far as the forecasting, I think we'd all agree that there was no roadmap here, right? So while those forecasts were certainly altered and we all had to adjust, there are some things we are seeing now, though we don't have a complete roadmap by any means at this point. I think right now what I'm seeing is tales of two types of consumers. With the stimulus checks and various dollars going into the consumers' pockets and not traveling, saving money on certain things they'd be spending money on, there were the needs versus the nice to haves. And that's what I'd like to distinguish what I think is going on right now. Those that were funding and crediting the nice to haves are seeing their delinquency rates rising now, and even just prior to now. Whereas the creditors that support the needs, let's say a retailer card that also sells groceries, those folks are predicting that their bubble is going to happen later in the fourth quarter as money gets tighter and tighter, even on the needs. So the nice to haves, and the other side of it, of the consumer, is, as we all know, certain sectors are not coming back right now. You know, the restaurant workers, the movie industry workers, those type of things are impacted. And some of those are your lower, maybe your lower paying jobs, and those folks that are servicing the lower credit market on those scores are seeing a delinquency rise faster and harder than those that are servicing maybe higher credit score market. So that's what we're seeing and hearing from our clients at this point.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Phil, Nathan, anything you want to add to that particular topic? And how has your forecasting models changed over the past, say, 6 months?
It's been very interesting, to say the least, over the last 6 months, and how everything flipped very, very quickly. But I completely agree, with everything that he's saying in regards to the nice to haves and the needs. We're noticing the same thing, in our line of business as well, where, some of the cell phone providers and whatnot, something that's not really a necessity that can be pushed down the road a little bit, we're noticing those rise much, much faster, than some of the basic utility type clients. I also think one thing to throw in when it comes to forecasting is, what our clients tell us their needs are, or what their strategies are saying to us. So, for example, as people are losing their jobs, companies are more lenient to be able to work with folks. And I think we've seen that impact our forecasting because, portfolios where we would expect a balance in full or maybe just, 2 payments, they're stretching out to 6 months. And, that opens up a whole host of other problems when you're trying to forecast something that, has never happened before. So a lot of the same challenges, but we're excited to step up to plate and try to solve them. So it's been definitely an interesting 6 months.
Phil, how are you seeing the world?
Yeah, firstly, I agree 100% with both have said. What I find, a challenge, if you will, for both our firm as a servicer and our clients is they assume that they need X number of people to cover something, let's say a program. What's transpiring is that the new originations are certainly down and the average spend is down. So let's take a card portfolio as an example. You've probably been expecting X number of people to service your portfolio based on your mathematical calculation. Maybe it's minutes per account per month, etc. So suddenly now we see, the originations are certainly not there at the same level. The spend's not there. Those people going into default are not there at the same levels, etc. So I'm sure some of the creditors had outstanding delinquency looking results in the months of April, May, and June. But you know, they're trying to control their spend, but at the same time realize, hey, I still need these people because this bubble is coming. So what do I do with these people, right? And it's a challenge because, you know, you don't want to lose those key people. By the same token, you know, and I'll get to it a little later, is, you know, your occupancy is definitely going down. These agents can only be occupied so much. What may have needed 25 people may mathematically only need 23 people, but we're going to get into a quantity versus quality conversation and all the other factors. But no, I
Right.
agree 100% where both gentlemen have gone.
You know, it's interesting. I am a numbers guy by definition, dealing with a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and forecasts are a big part of it. Well, historically in 9/11, I remember vividly that the rest of that year, so predominantly fourth quarter, people are saying, you know, planes are hitting buildings, forecasts are out the window. They just don't work. This has been that was immediate. This has been an ongoing saga, right? And the numbers fluctuate. You guys are all part of, you know, experienced businesses, both personally, your tenure, but your corporations have been around for quite some time. It's just interesting because the variables that you deal with, economic conditions, you want to talk about fluctuations, you know, financial decisions, things that abruptly change. How did you factor in work from home at the beginning part of the year, for example, when work from home didn't even exist in your models at any level that it exists today? So this is very much a moving target. And I'll just say my 2 cents on forecasting is typically we say, you know, visit it at least once a year, update it, you know, budget to actual, whatever. But based on what we're learning, I would suggest visiting it every quarter because, I mean, let's face it, that might not even be sufficient. But let's move on to a related topic. Phil, maybe you could initiate this, and that is the priority KPIs. Let's talk about what we're seeing out there and what has changed.
Sure. So, you know, there's a qualitative and a quantitative KPI. So I just wanted to point out one of the things that I've had to explain, I don't know why, but I've had to explain to a couple of my clients is why their pen rate's not as high as it used to be. To me, pen rate's really not that important. Some people believe it's important, but you know, if you're completing your list, let's deal with reality. The average handle time is increasing. Certainly in some conversations, depending on what your product is, it's really increasing, maybe 25%. We all know that our live contact and our RPC rates are going up and they're happening earlier in the morning. Well, you know, when you have that much of an increase in unemployment, people waiting for stimulus packages, et cetera, too. Yeah, when you phone them, unfortunately, at 9:30 in the morning, they're home, right? Or they're answering their cell.
Right.
So what's happening is, if you watch the curve in your contact rates and your RPC rates as a percentage of the whole, and when they're transpiring during the day, they're all happening much earlier in the day. So I would just say to everybody, you know, completion rate is far more important than pen rate. RPC rate is crucial, but depending on how you're building your dialers, you know, unique RPC rate's far more important, right? I was just looking at a few of them that I've been tracking. I look at the unique RPC rate, which is far more important. And those of us who've been in the industry for a while will know what I mean by say, you've established your RPC, when's your next contact or when's your next work date, et cetera, too. I think you need to be a little bit more creative with your no promises on your RPC rates, as an example. So if I call Mike Ginsberg, I don't get a promise out of him today, you know, guess what? When I call him 5 days from now, I probably could wager what he's going to tell me, depending on his situation. So I would be focusing on, you know, what's your average speed of answer? You know, what is your unique RPC rate? What is your RPC rate? And of course, what's your PTP rate and your kept rate? But those ones are the ones that are the key here. You know, pen rate, not important. Completion rate, definitely important.
Interesting. Thank you. Gentlemen?
Yep. So we've noticed, you know, very similar items. You know, I'll talk a little bit about AHT and some of the damage that's done to our business with some of our clients. You know, these calls are coming in, and you know, these are folks that usually have a job. they can't meet their obligations. So it's really stretching these calls out. And what it's doing is, even though volume in some cases is down, they wind up in a staffing situation where they're asking for additional FTE, but they really can't tell you how much, because we're in this whole new, world. I mean, there's an iPhone that's coming out soon. There's a lot of different, questions about that as well. And, it's almost a crystal ball theory. Like, I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to tell the future, but, we're noticing a lot of the same stuff.
Tim, any new KPIs or anything that you're seeing different right now that you guys on a broader international scale might be focusing on versus domestic?
Yeah, Nathan mentioned AHT and Phil mentioned occupancy. So on the outbound campaigns, the occupancy is going down. Pen rates are going down. They're not needed to be as high as they used to be, or maybe they never needed to be that high. But AHT on the inbound calls is longer, as Nathan mentioned, and it's causing that, and just the ability to find staff to work is a challenge, depending on how much domestic requirements are by a specific creditor, or maybe they were heavy in the Philippines with their servicing on those inbound calls, and that became a wildfire very quickly. So what we're noticing is a real focus by our clients, and thus by extension ourselves, on keeping AHT effectively low, not pushing it low just to hit a number, but to be as effective as possible. So some of the strategies that have been deployed are making sure we're keeping consumers from having to reach back out to us again and again. How do you do that? Well, you try to find the right solution. Working with the clients, coming up with extending the payment plans was already mentioned. Maybe they're going from 12 to 24 months, stretching out those payment plans, lowering the minimum payments that used to be acceptable in half, cutting them in half in some cases. So trying to keep those consumers from having to reach back out next week or next month, but pushing those contacts out further. And then with the pen rates going down, I think that's a real positive in a number of ways. I don't know about the others, but what we're seeing is a real concern by the regulators is how consumers are being treated during this crisis, whether it's the CFPB, who's reaching out to creditors and agencies alike, or your state regulators as well. So I think those pen rates being down is another positive from the standpoint of lower complaints and regulatory bodies being concerned.
We've been dealing with the scrutiny of the CFPB now for the past decade, right? And it got intensified because consumers are home. They are more readily available due to unemployment rates being where they are. Let me ask you something. In the past, we have seen that clients, not every client, but a lot of them just, for no rhyme or reason, they start cutting rates 10%. Why? Because they just want to cut rates 10%. A lot of clients are listening to this, right? A lot of creditors are listening to this right now. Let's talk about that. Have you, over the past 6 to 8 months, seen clients just arbitrarily, I'll use the word arbitrarily, cutting rates? Or are they being pretty patient with you at this point because they see that the recovery levels have been significant and the collectability has increased? Again, during the pandemic, maybe predominantly because of the stimulus. But what kind of reactions have you seen across the table? I'm going to start with Nathan this time, only because he hasn't spoken as much.
Yep. So I would say that we have noticed, some patience with our clients. SLA targets have been forgiven. For instance, in AHT being higher and dollars collected, we have not been getting or receiving penalties on any of those because they know that we are in a new world. So I think really where it's coming back around to get us is, we've got so many folks working from home now that really audit and compliance has completely changed, right? Where I think I'm in weekly meetings, with different audit type items that are coming up as we've got people working from home in all different locations. So I would say, as far as the KPIs go, they've been fairly patient, and then just trying to make sure that the security is, where it needs to be, first and foremost. So.
Good. Thank you. Gentlemen?
No, I'll agree with what Nathan said. I've not experienced where one of our clients wants to cut rates. I think they're realistic and understand, look, that's what's transpired, that's not the direction it's going to take. With all the deferrals out there, et cetera, too, you're going to need this manpower, and the conversations are going to change again. The other thing I'll say is I've noticed that a lot of our agents are becoming more, and they always should have been, but even more consultative and even almost therapeutic per se, because their listening element of the conversations increased considerably. If I think back to when I first got into this business, they always said, control the conversation. Well, this is not about controlling the conversation. This is about brand retention, right? And respect.
Phil, it's very interesting. Tim, hold off one second. I'll just respond to that and say, it's very interesting, the talk-offs, the discussions, the ability. But what I have found, Phil, maybe you agree with this or disagree, but your agents are frontline. Now, I don't like using frontline when you're talking about real frontline, police, hospital, healthcare providers, et cetera. But as it relates to the financial aspects of a business, when a consumer makes a phone call to you all, they have a lot of questions. And you guys are the gatekeepers. Your agents are the people that they either predominantly or exclusively speak with. Mm-hmm. And that's a very strong position to be in. You're providing guidance and leadership through these agents to the consumers. And I think it's a critical, front line from a financial perspective.
Yeah, I can tell you that a lot of people who, let's just say, have been delinquent with us in the past are up to date or current even when they want to call in on a customer service related message. Guess what? They're coming in through our line. They're not even going through the direct IVR or whatever to the customer service unit, because they've already dealt with that rep and he or she's already helped them out with their situation.
Absolutely. Tim?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of pick up on something Nathan said on the audit and compliance side, work from home. We've gone through, a number of audits, more than even normal, than the, every 6 months or every annual security audits, for instance. We've had to go through every single client and work with them on what does work from home look like, what's acceptable, what's not, what can we do today with the tools we have, and what will we do as we get more tools. And interesting enough, some of those constraints from early, what I'll call the BCP work at home in March and April and May, to where we're going today, is a shortage of equipment, getting PCs home. Now we have folks working brick and mortar, in some cases at a lower capacity, and then folks working from home. And strangely enough, what you realize is in the brick and mortar, maybe one station was servicing 1.3 employees. Now you send folks home with their computer, for instance, and I apologize for dog barks. This is the life we live in. You now can't add staff where you need it, whether it's at home or not, until you get more equipment in. What I do hope on the compliance side and other aspects of business travel, it'll be interesting what that looks like as we get around the corner of this. And I think if our company, and Teleperformance is any indicator, and I think it is, no corporation feels they need to go back to travel as usual pre-pandemic. So, some of these audits where our clients and our people were sending folks on site and this and that, I think some of that, they realize how much we can really get done effectively and not having to be somewhere. So I know my family's looking forward to that. I am too. I'm looking forward to some travel, but not maybe pre-pandemic.
You're not going to live out of a suitcase anymore, you're saying?
Right.
It's funny, I haven't been on a plane since February. In fact, the last time I went on a plane was the RMAI conference in Vegas in February. So yeah, I think it impacts. Let's drill down a second, gentlemen, and discuss this whole global security audit compliance, how it's evolved, where you think it's going to be, and where you think it should be. Because listen, we've all embraced, whether we like it or not, we've had no choice, Zoom calls and Teams and using various technology to communicate. And I would say with our staff and certainly with our organization, but how do you see that impacting how you continuously communicate with your clients, specifically as it relates to data security, audit, and compliance? Tim, you just spoke, so let's give the others a chance to respond first. And I think you've already touched this topic. So Phil, do you want to say something specifically as it relates to that?
No, I'm going to echo what Tim said. It's funny, we were just about to onboard a couple of programs into one of our nearshore sites down in Costa Rica. Literally, it was supposed to start March the 15th. Well, basically March the 14th, nobody was traveling in and out of Costa Rica. So it's like, okay, now what are you going to do, right? So the entire technology team basically did a complete remote security review there. So literally all the proof, et cetera, too. That changes dramatically. Then there's that happy medium, because I'm sure everybody on this panel has one client who may well be in a, we'll call it a secured space within the brick and mortars element. Well, if they're working from home, that secured space is not quite the same as it was there. There's certainly probably no metal detectors or whatever other requirement you may have had there. So there's finding that happy medium. I haven't heard of too many security breaches or issues within the industry, or at least they're not making the headlines of late. So, you know, I understand its importance, and it's definitively important, but maybe some extremes are going to be toned down a little, if you know what I mean.
You know, it's funny. Some of the executives years ago, not during coronavirus, have said to me, what keeps them up at night from a concern standpoint, not from an opportunity standpoint, is one data breach.
Mm-hmm.
One data breach, it doesn't, everything else pales in comparison to one data breach.
Yep.
And I am just amazed. You're absolutely right. I am fully amazed that there's not been one known issue, not one, that's hit the headlines as it relates to, hey, we're nomadic, we move people home. Hey, things internationally and domestically have changed. Unless I've missed it, and we pay pretty close attention to it, I agree with you. It's been pretty clear. Tim, do you want to add anything, or should we move on to the next topic here? Or do you guys have anything additional that you, or you know, as you see this, Nathan, if you want to add anything as well?
Yeah, so, you know, just to hop in on the audit compliance piece, you know, another portion of this, which has given us another problem to solve, is, you know, when it comes to disaster recovery, you know, normally you have a site that's got a generator, right? And you know, it can run for a period of days, and you've got, you know, UPSs under the desk so that people don't lose connections. Well, now that you've got, you know, maybe 70% of your staff working from home, 30% of your staff in the office, and you have a typhoon coming over to the Philippines, what's going to happen to those 70% that's out, spread out, you know, in that power grid? So, you know, and it's really been a partnership with our clients on, you know, hey, what can you all do? You know, is there any ideas that you have, or is there additional space that you could free up? You know, but solving those problems, I think, are what's really, really important as we look to move this work from home piece forward, because, you know, you're going to have to solve for what happens when a natural disaster comes, because it just looks completely different. You know, at one end, you've got people spread out, but on the other end, they don't have the same generator type, you know, capacity. So managing that, you know, in real time, you know, which side of the city is without power, how many of our employees are in that area, do we have to shift and call in other employees in order to help offset that? You know, it's, you know, as you head into hurricane and typhoon season, it's very important to not lose sight of that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, Nathan. You bring up a very important point, but Mother Nature and issues associated with tragic events such as the fires out in California, or you mentioned, God forbid, a typhoon, you know, coming through, or whatever the case might be, the hurricanes in the Gulf Coast here in the United States. These are issues you've dealt with previously. Mother Nature could be ruthless, right? And you deal with this. But this is a pandemic, and this is kind of a different time, right? Because usually a catastrophe hits, and then there's an issue, and then it kind of comes back to some sense of normalcy. There hasn't been any normalcy for the past 6, 8 months here. And I'm very concerned when you think about nearshore and offshore. 15, 20 years ago, nearshore really didn't exist as much as offshore to either India or later the Philippines, right? This has been a phenomenon now for about 20 years. And initially people thought, well, this isn't going to last. Well, it certainly has lasted, and it continues to last. Work from home, I only hope and expect that there will be continued work from home, not that everybody has to go back to the office, and it should be part of your solution, right? An integrated part of your solution, that you've perfected the issues of safety and security and compliance and all the things associated with work from home model. But the things that we have to concern ourselves with is not just the client's behavior, but certainly the consumer's behavior, your own personnel behavior, and then the regulators. Right now they've been pretty lenient about work from home. I'm concerned that that's going to change, and certainly concerned based on the election as well, the looming election. So, this is an important discussion topic here, and I kind of want to pass it around here. When you think about your nearshore and offshore capabilities, what impact do you think this whole work from home model is going to have both now, what are you seeing, and look forward past the election and into 2021? Tim, why don't we start with you?
Sure. And it kind of dovetails what I'm going to say with the topic that was brought up on by Nathan in the Philippines, and how do you deal with the natural disasters that are happening now that you have this work from home staff versus the traditional brick and mortar model. And what I think we've all seen is a real priority to get your business globally protected, meaning geodiversity. If you were too heavy, whether in India or the Philippines or in the Caribbean or wherever it might be, and if you had the ability based on the size of workforce you need to support your business, we found that we were launching during the pandemic, launching new clients that were coming from other places around the globe, let's say to the Caribbean and vice versa. So a lot of movement has happened, and I think that will help both whether it's work from home or brick from mortar from a BCP standpoint. We also have seen during the pandemic how different operations have dealt with it, different countries have dealt with the pandemic and how it has affected our businesses. For instance, in Jamaica, we've got a large operation. For the most part, they've dealt with the pandemic. First off, let's compare it to the DR, the Dominican Republic. Both shut down travel early on to help limit the spread of folks coming in. But then from there, it really took two different directions. In Jamaica, for instance, the government dealt with it by issuing curfews, at home by 10 p.m., at home by 8 p.m., don't be on the road type of thing. So we had to adjust our scheduling, but we were still operational. And when we were social distance in the call center, whereas another country, DR or some others, completely shut down the brick and mortar. So that also created that geodiversity and panic within the call center business to get folks from other parts of the world to switch where their business was being performed from. So that's what we've seen, and I think we continue to see that evolve because there's no saying what tomorrow's going to bring.
I would say the biggest impact that I can see is that, the cost of doing business is increasing. I mean, when it comes down to the simple fact of you can't hotel desks either for social distancing or because you have your staff split, I mean, that can be a significant, cost. So, I would say that that's probably first and foremost what I see the biggest change is, how do you restructure a floor plan to allow for social distancing measures? knowing that you're not able to put people as, as close together as they had been in the past. And I can only safely assume that even after these restrictions ease, that we'll probably have a different view of how closely we want to put people together in case something like this would happen, again. I would say that from an international perspective, the big thing that this has taught me is that, different areas are going to deal with things, different ways. I know the Philippines, they shut down public transportation and they didn't even think about it before they did it. We had employees show up to work and then all of a sudden public transportation, it came out from the president, was just done. So you have to get shuttles to shuttle people home because, you have a responsibility for the employees. So it's just been a unique experience.
Yeah, I'd also say one of the factors is each country and its infrastructure. So, your percentage of people working from home in the Philippines is going to be considerably lower than it's going to be in the US or Canada or wherever, because their internet speed where they live is non-existent, quite frankly. They can't even support the machines in some cases to be able to be effective. So I equate it to a gamer. They'll be lagging per se, or whatever colloquial expression you want to use. And Nathan's point is very valid. We experienced that too in the Philippines. Basically, we became the chauffeur/shuttle situation, and in some cases had to go out and rent accommodation and put a bunch of people in there because, quite frankly, these employees takes them 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours to get home type thing. So now they don't have a way in or out. They can't work from home either. So, and they want to work and they need to work. So, each situation is different. Whereas in Costa Rica, haven't seen any problem with anybody working from home. The speed is there. The infrastructure is stable. The connectivity is stable. The public transportation is stable, within reason stable. So you're dealing with all these challenges in all these different regions. And, it can start happening locally here at a state level. I can tell you up in Canada, our provinces, AKA your states, they have travel bans, meaning if you're crossing from one province to the other, okay, so go and sit in this room here for the next 14 days in quarantine before we let you get through. Well, that's obviously not effective too. So there's all these factors.
And Tim, before you respond, Phil, I just want to kind of extend that part of the conversation because you had mentioned as we were prepping for this roundtable here that not all creditors even have approved work from home or 100% work from home.
That's right.
What are the risks associated with that aspect of things? Boy, that could be disruptive as well.
Well, here's a simple mathematical equation. Let's say you have 50% of your staff working from home, and the other 50% of your programs in the brick and mortar location. God forbid one person gets sick or believes that they have any of the symptoms. So yeah. I can guarantee you every other person on that team's been within shouting distance, certainly psychologically, that they're going to want to now stay home for the 14 days, get tested, A, B, C. So now you're down to 50% of the size of your program. So, I don't want to manage by fear, but that's reality, right? It could happen.
Absolutely.
Hasn't happened here per se, but I'm saying could happen. Certainly seeing with, increase in spikes and levels, certain depending on where you are and you're located, it could happen.
Well, I've also heard, and I want to pass it around to the other two gentlemen, but I've also heard that, various clients may or may not accept working from home, and that's a factor. But also you have employees that have either said or demonstrated increased productivity, right? Because they're not in long commutes. Tim's shaking his head in Chicago, I'm here in DC. And regardless of the time, you're gonna hit Beltway traffic, regardless of that. You remove that from the schedule and you add that back in, sure, productivity is gonna go up. But also, Tim's dog just barked, okay? If it wasn't Tim's dog, somebody's baby's gonna cry, right? And you gotta deal with those things. People working from home, we have to give them a higher level of flexibility and not expect that they're gonna work the hour that they otherwise would have been in the car, more productively. Like if they wanna do their laundry at 11 o'clock, they should be able to do their laundry at 11 o'clock and still get the work done. How have you seen productivity? I know you guys, Tim and Nathan, have some perspective on this. So let's start with Tim.
Sure. overall, we've seen that flexibility in the workforce for work from home has had some real advantages, both for the workers and for ourselves and our clients. Namely, normally you take a commute to, whether it's the Philippines, Jamaica, other let's say offshore. Let's leave domestic out for a second, though it certainly applies there as well. Some folks are commuting, 2 to 3 hours a day round trip to jobs. And working from home now, well, let me put it this way. You can't schedule them the best 4 hours in the morning and the best 4 hours in the evening. No one's going to sit there and be unproductive in the middle of the day with that commute. It just doesn't work in most places, and any that I know of. So now that they work from home, you can take advantage of some of that, some split scheduling, because they can get some things done in the middle of the day when generally, if anything, you're overstaffed because you got your night shift folks coming in, your day shift folks still there. You got that time when everyone's there at the same time. So that's a real advantage. And, some of our large inbound collection programs where, we're incented or de-incentivized to make sure we hit line adherence at every interval. So now we can do that more effectively, and it helps us actually have less staff and be able to meet those targets that are out there. On the productivity side, I think from a collection standpoint, the work from home, those vets that have been with us, let's say a year plus, they really like it. There's a downside maybe for the newer employees going home and not really understanding and be able to build that camaraderie that they get in the call center. And that can be an issue that we're dealing with. And we have some plans and better tools and strategies around making sure we cover that. But the vets, they don't want to travel 2 to 3 hours a day or even an hour a day when they could work from home, and all they're concerned about is growing their own bottom line and their paycheck, and they're able to do that much easier. So that's what we're seeing.
Nathan, Phil?
Yep. We are seeing very similar things with the flexibility. People tend to really enjoy it. The only trade-off that we have there is, connectivity. We've had to create policies around, what happens if an individual employee is experiencing, connectivity issues. Is it our end? Is it the local internet service provider? How do you troubleshoot that? How do you identify when it's a problem so that they can just log out for the day and you're not paying for, lost productivity there? So I think overall it's a benefit, but we do have some things that we are still solving for, at this day, especially communication models. I was trying to, recruit overtime yesterday, and I just had to ask the question because the numbers weren't coming in. You think, hey, these people are working from home, they want the additional hours. Well, the communication wasn't getting all the way to the agent. So we really had to challenge our, managers and supervisors. We're in a different world now. You've got some people on site, some people at home. What are we going to do for that last 10% of the message to make it all the way to, Jack or Sally that, is the one that's going to be working that OT. So that'll get better as time goes on. But, we definitely have been rushing to try to increase our different lines of communication to our employees.
So I've seen less lates, I've seen less absence as a result of this, and we smile and we laugh, but I would encourage people to still have their agents take vacation days. I know they can't go anywhere, but accumulating it does nobody any good, and they probably do need that break. I'll catch on to what Tim said too, and I do see that. I think it's great that somebody is working circa from 9 to 11 in the morning, let's just say, then they're doing whatever they need to do. And they could be looking after an elderly parent or could be doing anything, and they need to go from 11 to 5, and then from 5 onward, they're there. I have a few programs where as we get into holiday season, and this is more on the care side, but potentially on the collection side too, they're looking to extend the hours of operation because they've been shortened as a result of all the things we've just previously talked to. And we have agents who say, hey, look, I'd like to do that. So do you mind if I don't work 8 to 5 and I'd rather do X and Y? Well, I don't see anybody objecting to it. I mean, Tim's point is very valid. in the old or the previous models, you know, you had a lot of people, we'll call it 8 to X, and then you had people from X to close. There's that crossover part, right? We were probably overstaffed and you were trying to do a ton of scheduling for breaks, for training, for lunches, et cetera, too, so that you hit each one of your intervals and you weren't at 110% of it financially, too. So I
By
see
a
how
show
that.
of hands, how many of you had a viable work from home solution in advance of the pandemic? Exactly. So this is all brand new. Tim, I think you started this conversation very well by saying this is basically the wild, wild west, right? We just don't know. We don't have a roadmap. We don't have the guidelines, you know, to apply to this because this is all brand spanking new. I think very strongly. I used to ask when I spoke publicly, I would ask, by a show of hands, how many of you are doing first party collections? It was all third party kind of work, right? And you kind of knew that, you saw this was going. Then when offshore or debt purchase happened, same question, very few hands. Today, more hands. I think work from home, when you ask a crowd in 6 months, everybody's going to raise their hand and say, you know, we have a viable solution. Let's go around the horn and consider this, you know, a parting shot like you would see on ESPN or something like that. But let's talk strategically. Let's talk first party. Look into your crystal balls. We all have them and they're 100% accurate and you'll be held accountable to this, right? But seriously, let's gaze out into the future and say strategically, where is first party going to be during the end of this pandemic? Because God willing, there will be a cure and there will be a vaccine. Okay, and we'll go on with our lives like we've done with the swine flu or we've done with, you know, other things over the years. Certainly the flu and the pandemic, we deal with the flu every year. So, you know, we'll deal with this in some capacity. It will become normal again. Go around strategically. Let's start with Nathan and work our way around and talk for a few minutes about how you're going to see the world, you know, post-election, post-pandemic, specifically as it relates to first party.
So for first party, I think that there's going to be a shift in those KPIs. I think it's going to be really about the brand and, you know, taking care of the customers first and foremost through this. You know, and I also think, you know, as you're taking care of the customers, you know, we've already noticed some different things happen, like customer experience teams becoming more involved and engaged to give feedback on different ways that they can change the process as we move from the traditional brick and mortar to either a mix of, you know, work from home and, you know, working in the office or some hybrid of the two. But, you know, ultimately, I think for a business to do well, you're going to have to look at those intersections of your company. So where does IT intersect with operations and HR intersect with operations, and just really look at those to say that when we're getting people out the door, you know, working from home, you know, there's certain checklists and guidelines that didn't exist before that are now in place today. And, you know, you're going to have success if you get really good at that. Like, for instance, how do you inventory and track equipment? You know, there's been new jobs created in IT where they are just solely looking after, you know, our equipment. You know, same with operations and, you know, communication models, different lines of communication and ways, you know, that we're able to get in contact with employees. And then also, you know, for anything new that we put in, how are you going to audit it, right? So putting that process in place, it seems like, you know, over the next 6 months, we're going to be building a lot of these long-term, you know, processes that are going to be around for years to come. And it's really, you know, a partnership in order to make sure that this, you know, new world, as we call it, you know, is going to work effectively.
Excellent. Excellent. Tim, we lost you there for a minute. I think that's a technology that, you know, we all kind of have to deal with in the internet. Why don't you go next and we'll save Phil for last. Talk strategically, look out in your crystal ball and tell us where we're going to be, you know, starting 2021 as we get this pandemic under control at some level.
Yeah, I believe that through discussing with our clients in the industry that most would agree they want a work from home hybrid solution where they have brick and mortar along with the work from home. And we're talking to our clients anywhere from 20 to, we have one that's okay with 100%. So I think it's here to stay. It's about ensuring the compliance and security and productivity. So we're implementing all those new features. Some are already in place and others are coming to a theater near you very soon, where we believe we can deliver the PCI compliance, clean desk policies from home. We already had, as part of teleperformance, in the tech support and customer service world, there already was a work from home. There was no way to deploy that out to 300,000 employees in a matter of a few months. So the collection industry, my company within the organization, and the other deployments was that, BCP model that we could deploy quickly. But we've got the roadmap and we'll be putting that out. So I think not every creditor, but I think most from what we're seeing will have a hybrid solution. I think that's a real positive for all the reasons we've been discussing. So we're looking forward to getting this behind us and having that flexibility. I think it's going to help the clients and their costs as well as our own.
Tim, thank you. Phil?
Just tacking on to what everybody said, I think I foresee the elimination of what I call the separation of church and state, meaning traditionally the care unit's been way over here and the collection unit's been way over here. And I can foresee them being merged. Certainly, we're going to have a lot of early stage issues that are more care related per se, I'll call them, than old school or traditional arms. So I see them being merged. I see some more specialty units. How many thousand deferrals are out there that are soon coming up where their time is up? And how are you going to contact these people? How are you going to deal with these people? Have you even bothered to think about that? Or were you hoping that everything would be fine? Because it probably won't be. I think you'll start seeing more pre-delinquent activity and campaigns that are starting to go through digital, meaning as opposed to waiting till his deferral's expired and finding out that he still can't pay, should be that proactive reaching out, and that's given the current situation. And then even into the future with new originations, because the contact mechanism is not about the telephone anymore. Let's be honest, you can take a look at somebody who what I will call a chronic delinquent, who's in your portfolio, who's been in your portfolio for the last 6 months. He or she's only aged within 15 days of where they came in and started. And they've never bothered to answer your phone because they've already figured out what your ante is. So I think you're going to start seeing a revolution of contact strategies. I certainly know when 1-800 you owe me money calls me what they want. I don't really need to call them back to find out what it is. And I'm sure, so do consumers. And that's certainly not to say anything negative about chronics, because to all the creditors, we love the chronics, right? That's what really helps the bottom line.
Well, wonderful. Boy, I couldn't have queued up a better segue, because as I kind of think about this and put in my parting shot and my 2 cents here, it's all about the P's. Perseverance. I got to tell you, this industry perseveres. And, we've been hit a variety of ways. As long as over the years, and as long as everybody kind of understands and adapts appropriately, kind of leads to the second P, which is patience, right? The clients, you all, with your staff, with your shareholders, this is unprecedented times. So when you think about, precedents being set previously, and now you're working with a new script, patience goes a long way. This industry is built on perseverance and entrepreneurialism. It's been around since the Stone Age. Ever since there's been a need to collect a bill, there's been someone to collect it for them, right? But your business has been just like any other industry. Tim mentions movies, for example, the film industry, decimated as a result of coronavirus. The retail and certainly the food industry, the restaurant business, decimated as a result of coronavirus. There will be movies again, I believe. I enjoy watching them at home. There'll be restaurants again. I am certain of that. Certain of them will reopen, others of them may not. But the other part of it, and why I say it's a great segue, Phil, is the third P, profits. We're not running a charity here. Nobody's running a charity here. We're in business, and the bottom line matters. But also, if the client understands that, they too can benefit from a increased bottom line from their perspective, and the consumer as well. If you think about the consumer, earlier they had government stimulus. Today they may not. Going forward, they may be employed. Today they may not. It really just depends on the consumer, but they too are looking at their own personal financial well-being. The hierarchy of payments has changed abruptly. Okay, we used to have a traditional hierarchy of payments. Right now, what is most important? It varies from individual to individual, but I would say having room on their credit card is very, very critical right now. Having cell phone, making sure that they are able to connect to the internet, excuse me, remotely. These are the things that are most important. But as you kind of look at this, no one has a crystal ball. Things are going to change starting November 3rd. If the election is counted on November 3rd, it will change. Things will change. We look at the Supreme Court, things are changing. So we react. I do believe this industry is built on perseverance and patience now. I've never seen this kind of patience level, and I really enjoy it. I think people understand barking dogs, internet disconnections, and the ability to kind of get work done. But at the end of the day, the common denominator is operating efficiently and profitably, so we all remain kind of going forward here. So thank you. I will tell you, you guys have been terrific. I think you've been candid, extremely professional, not tripping over each other, interrupting each other, like we've seen in the past. I won't mention when. But, as we kind of think about things here, I'll tell you, we move on, and you guys have had decades of experience individually as well as collectively. And the good news is you appear to be in good health, and we'll continue to move forward as the environment treats us, and we'll make decisions accordingly. I want to thank each and every one of our subject matter experts for their time and also for their willingness to share. This has been a candid conversation. I greatly appreciate that, and we all move onward. Thank you very much for your time today.
Hello again. That was a wonderful roundtable, wasn't it? I learned a lot from our wonderful speakers, and I'm sure you did too. Before we finish, I want to quickly go over Q&A. If you asked a question in chat and hasn't been answered already, don't worry, you'll receive a response within 24 hours through email or another similar channel from one of our SMEs. In addition, I highly encourage you to connect with our speakers through the platform. They're extremely knowledgeable, and they're super excited to share their knowledge with you. So I definitely encourage that. And feel free to reach out to us too, and to Mike, because I'm sure he'd love to talk with you as well. So once again, thank you for attending the Business Revolution Week, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.